that. I may take it with me when I leave. I'm just kidding. Gylan, is this from that same lady? This table?
You're live, first of all.
Oh, well, hello, everyone. I was just saying I was going to steal a table. Welcome to the show. So I am going to share this out, so give me just a moment. And I don't see it yet, so we're just going to get into it.
It should be there.
I don't see it, so I'm not going to stress. All right, I'm just going to start. All right, so Kirsten, it feels so strange saying my name, our name, to another person.
I was like, your name.
Our name. Welcome to More Than Magic. I'm very excited to have you here, so thank you for saying yes.
Thank you.
And we'll get into who you are and what you're doing at this stage in your life and all of that good stuff. But I have decided something that I really want to do at the beginning of every show. Our names are very important. And I think it's just funny and serendipitous and all these other things that we happen to have the same name. Mm-hmm. So before we get into everything, I would like to know, how did you come about your name? And what is its meaning for you? Of course, names have a standard meaning, and then, like, what is it for you? So I'll let you.
Okay, so my mother actually said that she wanted both of her children to have names that started with K for whatever reason. And she heard Kirsten. She thought it was beautiful, and she loved the meaning of it being like, anointed one.
Right.
And her father was very, very knowledgeable, and he always told her that everybody really lives into their name. They grow into their names. And so she stressed that a lot when I was younger. She was like, you're very special, Kirsten.
I love that. Well, it's true, knowing what I know of you thus far. So this is a funny story. We were just trying to figure out how exactly. This is our first meeting in person, but there's like a certain excitement when you see someone with your name, especially when it's another Black woman with an unusual name. So I think it was in a plant group. I think it was the Black Planters group or one of those plant mama groups. And I was like, oh, wow, how do you spell yours? How do you pronounce yours? And then so all of that is what kind of things coalesced, and now we're here. So where do we start? So I told the last guess this. I am not a professional yet. I'm working my way there. So I have some questions, but then I also am just going to kind of ask you some things that are not on the list. And one thing that I wanted to ask you, when I shared that we were going to be doing the show, in that post, I asked everyone, when was the first time you saw a Black female doctor? How old were you? And then when you had that experience, how did that impact you? So I want to ask you that same question.
Okay, it's actually kind of sad. I hadn't had a Black female doctor until I think last year. And knowing what I know about like how doctors misdiagnose, Black patients, when I realized that there was a Black female doctor at the VA clinic that I go to, I immediately wrote in a request to change my doctor. No offense to the guy that I originally had, but I was just so excited to have someone who could recognize my hives as hives and not as a rash or something else, or who can say, okay, maybe you have anemia not just because you're a Black female and Black females bleed heavily, but maybe because of other reasons. And so I absolutely love her. But just last year, my first Black female physician.
Yeah. Well, and that's very common, which is another reason I wanted to invite you on the show, because we were just discussing before the show started, representation is so important. No matter what segment of the community you belong to, no matter what, culture you come from, it always feels good to see someone look like you in a shared space. But more importantly, with medicine, it can be a matter of life or death, literally. So how did you even get started on this path, and when did you know, that's what I want to do?
This is kind of crazy. But my parents were medics in the Army. They were combat medics. My mom fell into a foxhole or something, and my dad went and rescued her. And then
I love it.
And he had saved it was in the middle of winter in Washington, I think, and he had saved a cot for her right next to the heater in the tent with 300 other people, after he realized that she was missing before he went to go find her. So they joined in medicine basically. And then my father worked as a nurse assistant my whole life. I think he just recently, a couple of years ago, he stopped working. But my parents met as medics. And then every time I was bored or anything when I was growing up, my parents would hand me a first aid nursing book. And when I grew up in Fifth Ward, Houston, Texas, which is really rough. I was kind of very sheltered from how rough it is. Like if there was a drive-by or something, probably initiated by one of my cousins, but if there was a drive-by, my parents would be like, "Oh, it's fireworks, just lay down," you know.
Right.
So, and I noticed like all of my relatives, everybody had they had the sugars. Everybody was like going blind because of it, missing a leg or a toe. Everybody had all these chronic issues. And my dad worked at a private hospital that was an hour away. And he would go there and I would see that there were all of these, it was beautiful, by the way. The hospital is beautiful.
Right.
And the type of people who went there, they came for like different issues. Like it was something more acute, like, oh, I broke my arm, or oh, you know, I fell in this. It wasn't to manage their chronic diseases.
Right.
And I think when I saw that, it was like bring your kid to work day when I was really, really young. And I was like, this is not fair. This is not the same. Like, why is it so different where I come from? And how can I change that? And that was before I learned what a health disparity was. That was before I got into medical humanities. And, but I knew at that point in time, probably even at 4 years old, that, you know, medicine would be something I would want to go into. I wanted to be like my dad and my mom. I loved that they knew about the human body. I thought it was exciting, and I wanted to be able to help people that needed help, that looked like me.
Right, right. Well, and I think that this has the potential to be really educational for people. I have a friend, Kalia, who I adore, who is a history professor at UTSA. And she recommended a few years ago that I read Medical Apartheid. And whew, that book completely like undid me. You mentioned medical disparity. Just for some people who may be watching who don't understand what that is, could you kind of share your knowledge, you know, just what exactly that is? Because I don't think everyone is even aware that that's a thing.
Okay. So it's a proven fact that there are some factors, that different characteristics that people have that lead to them not receiving equal care in medicine. It can be their demographic, it could be their race, it could be their age, it could be their social status, it could be their finances, and a lot of that you're born into your race, and it's because of the makeup of the medical field, who the doctors are, how expensive and how hard to get like medical care is, and then it's where the clinics are, what type of clinics they are. It's very, very complex, but it's a simple thing to like at least that everybody should understand.
Right, right. And it's very real. And I do think there are facets of the population that, you know, aren't even connected to the medical community that are starting to understand it, because social media has been tremendous in kind of shining a light on things that were kind of brushed under the rug before. So there is more awareness, but even outside of being aware, it's like something has to be done. So it's just really nice and affirming to know that not only is the medical community shifting, but there are, you know, people that look like me that are helping that shift. So whenever I hear like med school, my head automatically starts to hurt, because I just think of like I have a friend who's a clinical psychiatrist. I have another friend who's a pediatric doctor, and I just hear about like the studying and the hours. Can you explain, or will you explain for our audience, what the process is to even begin on that path? Because it's not like you can just wake up like your junior year in college and be like, I think I'm going to go to med. I mean, there's so much that you have to do to lay that path out before yourself. So for someone who's watching who thinks like, I might want to be a doctor one day, what should they do, and what did you do?
Okay. Ignore everything about high school. You don't even have to do dual credit classes. In fact, it's a bad idea to do dual credit classes, because if you don't take them seriously and you make a C that's on your transcript, and that same transcript's going to be used no matter what to apply to medical school 10, 20 years later. It's going to affect your GPA. So chill in high school, live your life, be happy. Don't even take AP classes. It doesn't matter. Some medical schools don't accept AP credits, actually.
This is the first time hearing this.
Which is insane. So you have all of these gunners, that's what we call them, like people who are like kind of neurotic about their their education,
Right.
and they take all these AP courses because they want to become doctors, but it's a little bit backwards. So finish high school. As soon as you finish high school, I would start volunteering, but I would volunteer in ways that were actually like impactful. That's how I volunteer because it keeps my interest, and I feel like I don't want to waste my time or anybody else's time just like serving soup in a kitchen. You know, when there's change that can be made, I can be an effective person. So find a cause, find something you're interested in. Even if it's like something like photography, you can find a way to incorporate that into helping the community in some way or helping some community in some way. And find a community that you are like dedicated towards. Like most of my volunteer opportunities have been with the medically underserved children. And so that was what I chose to focus on for a long time. And then that's step one, volunteer.
Right. It's a lot. No, I know it's a lot, but we want to hear all of it.
So college, make straight A's. Do your best. Do your best. I mean, there are ways around it if you do badly ever. There are many ways around it. Where you can do like a special master's program afterwards, which is maybe $40,000. So you don't want to have to be in that situation. Right. But from the start, if you just try your best and make straight A's and get through those weeder classes like Chem 1, Chem 2, Bio 1, Bio 2, Organic Chem 1, Organic Chem 2, Biochem, like all that stuff, then you'll be fine. But while you're doing that, you also need to continue volunteering. You need to find something, like do some type of research project. It's not really necessary for the mid-tier and lower-tier medical schools, but it's becoming more common that most applicants have a research publication that they've done to some scientific journal, or they've presented some poster at some symposium. It was kind of insane because it's like undergrad, you know? Yeah. So you want to make sure you get into research. You can show that you at least understand what scientific research is about. And especially if you're applying to one of the higher tier medical schools, like the top 50. Besides that, there's so much. Oh my goodness. Yeah. You want to build up connections with your professors. I have my professors like on my phone. Like I can text them from 7 years ago. I can like say, hey, how's your child? How are you doing? How's your illness? Right. And just having that actual personal connection came in handy whenever like I asked for letters of recommendation.
Yes, I heard this.
You need very, very strong letters of recommendation. You don't want it to just be from someone that you're shadowing for, like a doctor you're following around in a hospital for 2 weeks for 10 hours who's like, yeah, they seem like they'll be an okay physician. No, you want somebody to say like, I absolutely stand behind this person. They're kind, they're sincere, they're amazing, and they're dedicated. And I can tell that they're dedicated, and I really represent them. I mean, I really appreciate that, because I've read of times where people have written LORs and we can't see what's on the LOR. We waive that right when you submit them. You have to submit them in a funny way, but like you can't see your LORs. And so I've heard about people getting calls from medical schools, like when they're like, hey, why didn't I get in? Or why did you guys deny me? And they'll say, oh, well, one of your LOR writers said that they didn't recommend you because they said you're not actually a good person. And that you like would leave work early and like all of this stuff. So you want to make sure you're actually building like
a genuine connection.
A genuine connection with those people.
Have some integrity. And
And then after all of this school, these upper level science courses, getting A's, blah, blah, blah. If you're still in the running to become a doctor, then you need to make sure you, what's next? You have to apply. So, you have to take the MCAT. Take the MCAT, which you basically need like minimum 550 hours of studying in order to do well, typically. And you have to kind of do a little bit of research on how to study for the MCAT, because you're just given a bunch of information. Like literally while you're learning stuff, the stuff is leaving your head and you can feel it. Like it's amazing how much you have to learn. And so you have to figure out how to study for 12 hours a day for a few months, and how to, take care of your health while you're doing so,
It's intense.
And then after the MCAT,
I'm getting like my chest is getting tight, and I'm just listening. But no, this is amazing. This is good to know.
After you score a certain score, then you apply for medical school, which is very, very expensive. Thankfully this year, interviews were online due to COVID. Yes. But otherwise, I think I would have spent upwards of $10,000 for this this cycle.
Right.
Just one person, just me. I would have spent
Yeah.
upwards of $10,000 because you have to, once you get the interviews, you have to fly out and, get a hotel room and see them and then fly back in the middle of the school semester too. And the application process is pretty harsh. You have three different things you can apply, three different application services you can use. You can use AMCAS, which is like the normal MD schools.
Okay.
There's allopathic and there's osteopathic schools, medical
Right.
schools you can go to.
Right.
And what everybody's more familiar with are the allopathic schools. So for the allopathic schools in the U.S., you can use the AMCAS application service to apply. For the Texas medical schools, they have their own separate service.
Of course, Texas has its own.
But it's nice, though. It's really nice.
Okay,
they did a good job because
Okay.
Texas really funds their medical education
I can
because they
see
want
that.
more doctors in Texas. They also have the easiest way to get around malpractice lawsuits in Texas.
Why does that not surprise me?
Because they want to attract more doctors to stay here.
Right.
But Texas, it's so much cheaper to use the Texas application system, and the Texas medical schools are so cheap, and they accept by law they have to accept 95% or something of residents from
no
Texas.
idea.
It's amazing. So instead of spending $300,000 for a medical education, you might end up just paying $100,000 if you're a Texas resident, which is lovely. And then there's another application service called ACOMAS, and that's for the osteopathic schools and around the U.S., not including the Texas ones.
Right.
So each of these application services, it took me 2 or 3 months to finish an application.
For each one.
But I did them all at the same time because
Okay.
you want to finish them at the same time. And then you want to
Okay.
submit as early as possible, which is June, if you can. And then you have to wait, and then you can receive secondaries from those medical schools. And then each secondary, you pay for the application service in the first place. So it could be a few $100s per application service of those three.
Okay.
And then when you submit that and you say which schools you want to go to, then you have to get secondaries from those schools. And to submit a secondary, which is another type of application that asks more specific questions, what made you decide to become a doctor? Name a time you had an obstacle. Some of them, it ranges from one question that you have to fill out to 9 or 10 and essay questions. So you have 2 weeks to submit usually after you get those essay questions. You have probably 30 schools you've applied to, and you have 2 weeks to submit all of those essay prompts to the secondaries. And each secondary can cost from free, which is really rare, to $110, $120 each secondary. So it's 30 schools, $110 per school, and then the primary application itself. And then once you start getting interviews, you have to pay to go to those interviews if it's not during COVID. I was very, very lucky. So it's a very, very, very expensive process.
I'm glad you're breaking down the financials on this, because I remember having a conversation with someone, and she essentially said, doctors make too much money. And I said, well, too much, you can't really quantify what's too much. You can't put a price on what service helps people live longer and live a better quality of life. But also, just what you've described, that it's you're going into medical school you've already spent so much money just to get to it, and then medical school itself. So I'm glad you're kind of breaking that down and helping people understand the little intricacies, because that is a lot. That is a lot. And so, So I have a question. I'm kind of going all over the place, but so you are also a veteran, and I want to know if anything that you did while you were enlisted also helped steer you in this path, or did you have a completely different job function? Because I was surprised to find out you were a veteran. I follow your stories. I'm sure you see me I'm always sending a little heart or something. I find you really fascinating and interesting. And so you posted something, I think it was on Veterans Day. I think you got your acceptance.
Yeah, I got
letter
into medical
on
school on Veterans Day.
And I was like, oh my goodness, she's a veteran too. So what did that part of your career look like? And did that influence your decision as well, or did it make your conviction stronger? How did that tie into it?
So it actually made my convictions a lot stronger, because I had this goal. It was kind of a pipe dream, though, to say, okay, I want to become a doctor. I can do it. I put it in my head, but I didn't really know. I don't know any Black doctors. I haven't seen any, and doctors don't look like me. They don't act like me. They don't come from my background, especially from Fifth Ward, Houston, Right. And so when I joined the military, I kind of did it because my family first of all, I was going through something, but also my family, I knew they couldn't afford school for me. There was no way, absolutely no way. And I knew they would do anything they could in order to help me.
Yes.
And so
that's what we do. That's
exactly.
Yeah.
And so I joined the military as a cryptologic analyst, which was a Korean linguist. They gave me the language Korean, which is awesome. It was, I learned it in a year and a half.
I have to introduce you to my sister. She's teaching herself Korean.
Really?
And you all would get along
is she into
famously.
K-pop?
Yes, she loves, what is the group?
Oh
There's a group that she's obsessed with. And I
Yeah.
go visit her and my mother, and they're sitting there, and they watch all the shows. They know all of the
BTS.
BTS, yes.
Yeah.
No, BTK. No, BTS?
BTS.
Yeah, they're part of like BTS Army. It's a lot. I'm like,
That's a
okay,
lot.
this is...
Yeah.
But it's a whole culture. I love it. But yeah, I'll have to introduce you to, because she's literally teaching herself the language. And
It's a lovely language. It's so gorgeous. It's my favorite language ever.
So tell me again, a cryptological specialist? Is
Yeah,
that
it was the title kept changing
okay.
like every few years. It was like cryptological analyst and like all this stuff.
Analyst,
but
okay.
I was basically just a Korean linguist.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating.
It was awesome. I really enjoyed it. And I mean, it wasn't really connected to medicine. I had that goal to get into the military and get into the medical field that way, so I can see like what all it was about. But when I saw that opportunity, I was like, this sounds pretty awesome. I'm going to go for it. They're going to teach me a language, and I'm going to have all these opportunities because of it.
Right.
And I mean, you benefit from learning a language. Like all the other jobs in the military, I was like, what can I benefit from for real? Because I'm doing this for me. The language was my favorite by far. It's like the best language school in the world too.
Really?
Yeah.
Language is a bridge. And I only speak 2 languages fluently, and then there's like 3 others that I like flail about and just I just make it work. But I do think it's so important, especially to learn languages that are not like everyone is sort of guided towards Spanish or possibly French, but it's really good to be able to go places in the world and communicate with people. It's a sign of respect.
Yes.
And it opens you up to other communities and other cultures, because I've noticed, like, just in traveling, if you even, I mean, you're fluent, so this is different, but if I even make an attempt to communicate with someone in their language, you're like speaking to their heart. Whether or not you're adept at it, whether or not there's a mastery, just the fact that you're trying to communicate, like there's such a level of respect. And then when you get to the level where you are, where you're like fully communicative, so you learned in a year and a half, that's dope.
And then we learned it was like college, not U.S. college level Korean, but Korean college level Korean. Like it was amazing. At one point we were doing over 300 words per day. We were getting tested on. It was wild. Very exciting. And then once I went through that, I was like, well, I can go to medical school. Like, this will be fine.
Yes. That's a lot of information. So how many hours a day did you have to study to retain that? Like, I'm starting to see your brain is just built for all this. Of course, there's effort and hard work and all that too, but there's a certain type of wiring I think that's required to be able to take in vast amounts of information and retain it and then apply it.
Yes,
So,
I agree.
yeah.
Well, I like to gossip in Korean to my professors, and no one else could understand. Like, my listening was really, really good. My speaking was really, really good. Reading, And so when the other students, like, they would be behind on, like, some of the readings or something like that, and I would be gossiping to the professors, like, in the middle of class, and they'd be like, stop. Can you stop? Like, you're, like, talking too much. But that helped me a lot in picking up the language.
Right.
I had a lot of fun learning Korean. It's beautiful, and it works with my brain. I actually can't learn Spanish, so...
But it's interesting. I've heard people say that. I have a friend that speaks Cantonese and can't learn Spanish. Yeah. And he's like, my brain just doesn't connect to it. The parts of your throat and your mouth that you use to form certain words, like he can't roll his R's like at all to save his life. But it's okay. Like, we all have something that we connect to.
Exactly.
And for you, I think Korean probably just opened you up to a whole other, or not other, but yeah, another level of life.
Yeah.
So that's so cool.
Thank
I didn't
you.
know this about you. Okay, cool. So you mentioned earlier about volunteering, and when we were making well, I didn't make the flyer. Let me not fake the funk. Gylan made the flyer. I just gave him the information, and I'm like, that's pretty. But I was kind of, I think I'd messaged you and I said, what do you want it to say under your name? Because I'm very careful to always address people how they want to be addressed. So you said first year medical student, but I know, I added, I also feel like you are a community oriented person, and you definitely are like a servant. And sometimes people don't like being called a servant because we have all these ideas about servitude, but because I follow you, I know that you are very much involved with the ASL community, and you are instrumental, along with some other people, in getting this ASL brought to or back to UTSA.
Yes.
I saw that I have seen that you also go to hospitals and sit with children who are ill, which, I cry easily. I'm just like, okay, maybe I need to make more time in my life to do these things. It's very inspiring. And then you're also a big sister. And when I say big sister, I mean part of the Big Brother, Big Sister organization. How do you prioritize your schedule to make time? And what compels you to do? Because, we just heard everything that you have had to do up to this point and what you're going to have to do. And then to still be able to, something is driving you to do these things. And I think it's beautiful. But how would you describe that? Like, what would you say?
So, my family is amazing. I absolutely love my parents. My dad was at work 24/7 when I was growing up, but I know his spirit. He's amazing. My mom, during the AIDS epidemic when in the 90s, my mom would volunteer at the hospice clinics, and she would sit with those who were dying from AIDS and they were alone because, the stigma against it, and she would hold their hands and listen to their stories and stuff. And that was the first time my mom was volunteering, and we couldn't come along because she brought us everywhere. We worked at the food bank. We volunteered there, and then we took food from the food bank because we were poor. So so we were volunteering all through growing up and everything, and she taught us it was very important to like give back. Sometimes she would pick up someone who was like on the street and didn't have a home, and she would like bring them to our house, let them have showers, feed them a good meal and stuff. She's an amazing person, and she's incredibly inspiring, and I love her so incredibly much. And so I'm actually Jewish.
Yes, I was going to ask you. That wasn't on the questions I sent you, but I'm like, oh, I need to ask that too. There's so many things that.
So we do mitzvahs, right? It's like kind of in the Jewish culture, the Jewish way, where you're supposed to do a mitzvah every day. It's like a good deed that you do for someone else, and you don't expect anything in return. And so I don't know if it's just because my mom was raised having to do mitzvahs, and it just rubbed off on me. But it doesn't feel like it's something that I like have to do in order to be classified as a good person or something like that. It's just that I guess I've done it so often that
it's who you are.
It's part of who I am. And I actually enjoy it. I like listening to people's stories. I like meeting people. I like expanding my social circle. I like being helpful to others. And when I was younger, I went through some pretty harsh things, and I felt more alone than I have ever felt in my entire life. And I decided I didn't want anybody who met me to ever feel like that. So.
Okay. I'm sorry. No, it's okay. I'm so emotional. All my friends know this. I tear up very easy. But that's beautiful. And I sensed that from you.
Oh, thank you.
I sensed it there. I didn't know, but I knew. There's just something there. So you mentioned your parents. And I've seen you post things just about your family, and you all just look like there's love there. I guess that's the easiest way to say it. How instrumental have they been in also, just supporting you with the process that you're in now? And tell me anything else you want to tell me about your parents, because like I love them now. I'm like, oh, but family. There's a good friend of mine, Dion. Hi, Dion. And we talk frequently about support and the nature of support, and how it is a truth that no matter what you're going through in life, if you have the amount of support that you need, or the right kind of support, you can get through almost anything. I can attest to that personally. I've had some tribulations that other people would have been their undoing, but I had support. And so how would you describe that within your family dynamic, just the support for you on the medical school track? And because what you're doing is not easy, and a lot of times, even with family, I don't want to say people fall away, but it's just like, ooh, that's a lot. I'm just going to let her do that thing over there by herself. But I can tell that's not your family at all.
No. I think ever since I was 4 and I said I wanted to become a doctor, my family was like, okay, that's what she's going to be. And that's just what they locked into their minds. Even no matter what grades I brought home or anything, they were like, okay, that's our future daughter, you know, that's how it's going to be. And their like undying support like that, like helped me kind of be really confident about my future when it came to that. And that was really nice. But the thing is, it's not about the whole doctor thing. Like, my parents would have supported me if I said I wanted to be a librarian. Yes. They would have been like, and like being a librarian would be awesome, by the way. Yeah. But like, my parents are very supportive, and they care about how you feel growing up. And I really liked the way they raised us. It was really sweet. I don't think I can live up to that and like raise children that way, but they did a good job.
You're doing great with Bowser.
Thank you, my doggy.
You're welcome. But no, that's something I think that's really important for parents to hear, that you would have been supported no matter what. Because I think there's a tendency for parents to do this thing where they project all of their successes and failures onto their children. So there's pressure to be something, to do something. And a lot of times it's because of a parent's unfulfilled dream. And it has nothing to do with what the child wants to do. And that is something, unfortunately, that I see a lot of and have seen a lot of through my life. And conscious parenting reminds you that your child's not your possession. They're not, they're an assignment but in the best way possible, you know? So it's just really affirming to hear also within our community that you have had that. That's really beautiful. So hello to what Mr. and Mrs.
Osborne.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. So it's funny because initially I think on social media, like, your name was Kirsten. Am I saying it correctly? Nguyen. When there is no N.
It depends on the region.
Okay.
Supposedly, I don't know which. I can't even remember. He's from Dalat. My husband's from Dalat, Vietnam.
Okay.
I don't know which region that's in because I'm ignorant.
Okay.
So he just told me say when, and I was like, cool, that sounds good.
Oh, that's right. Well, and I had seen it or heard it pronounced different ways at different times, and I never am quite sure. Oh goodness, I thought I turned this off. I did not. I'm gonna turn it off now for these are text messages. It's probably people watching the show, like, speak up or something. But I just really have a thing about honoring people's names and saying them correctly, which I think you and I, having the name that we do, it's a constant battle. Like, it's almost like once a week. I'm either, I try not to fuss with people, but someone will say, I sent you an email, you didn't respond. And I'm like, okay, check my email. How did you spell it? Kerie. And I'm like, no, let me, just this past weekend, and then actually 2 days after that. And we even talked about, like, with medical professionals trying to correct you. It's a lot to contend with. It's a lot. But it is what it is, and you can't get in a place where you're stuck and angry about it. But it's definitely frustrating.
Yeah, but I love my name so much, so I'm like, why can't they just say it correctly?
So it's just Nguyen. No, it's just Nguyen. Like Nguyen. So phonetically, like Win.
Yes.
Kirsten Nguyen. Yes. But I know that people butcher that a lot.
Yes. They think I'm Nguyen because I'm black, so I must be Nigerian. Yes.
Oh, I didn't. Okay. I can see that.
Yeah, it's great.
But there's something too. I have a theory, and you can tell me what you think about this. I'm like veering off. So Guylan says we should name the show Off the Rails because I always have like questions, and then I go, skirt, I'm like off. But I have a theory. To me, when there is a black or brown face attached to a name, any name, there's less of an effort to say it properly.
I believe so too.
Because there are names that are multisyllabic and, big names that people will look at, and because there's a level of respect there, it's automatically like, well, that's, it's Dostoevsky, it's Rachmaninoff, whatever it is, people will pronounce it. I've had people from the culture that my name comes from that won't make an effort to pronounce it, and it's just Kirsten. Gosh. And that is something that is challenging. So my question for you is, when you go into practice, how are you going to deal with patients? Like, what is your methodology? Like, have you thought about things like that? Like, I know that's really
with
far
my
in the
name?
future. Yeah, like if
Yeah. Well, okay. So when we lived in Hawaii, sometimes I couldn't get my packages because my last name's Nguyen, and so they'd be like, like,
Right. You're like, give me my package.
yes. I'd be like, I'm Kirsten Nguyen. Hello. I decided I'm actually going to change my last name before I go to medical school. I'm trying to.
Oh.
Yes, like I'm working it out with my husband, trying to see how he feels about it. But I really want to be an Osborne because I'm originally an Osborne. And I'm the first doctor in my family, and I want to like bring some honor to the name. Yes, that would be nice. But if not, then I want to make my own last name, and I want my husband to have our own last name together. But he has this weird idea because he's Kevin and I'm Kirsten, and he wants us to be the Credibles. So we're like Kevin, Kirsten, Credible, like the Incredibles. I don't feel like that's not
Kevin. If you're watching, no.
Exactly. I don't want to be Dr. Credible. I don't want to be Kirsten Credible. It's weird, and I don't want to be known for that. So.
Yeah, that's I have no say in the matter. I'm not involved, but no.
Yeah.
That's different. That's different, but it's okay. I mean, I like alliteration too, so I kind of understand where he's coming from. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it's
not gonna do that.
Yes.
Well, okay. So how long did you live in Hawaii, and what was that like?
Oh, I lived in Hawaii for 2.5 years, I think, and I absolutely loved it. It's probably my favorite place on earth. I got there. I was absolutely terrified. This is so silly, but the only thing I knew about Hawaii was like Lilo and Stitch, and I was like, aliens, no, I don't want it. It was ridiculous. And so my husband was like, hey, let's move to Hawaii. I want to get stationed there. And I was like, not my thing. I'm gonna go to Korea. And so I was stationed in Korea for a while, and then afterwards we got married, and I moved to Hawaii. And I was terrified because I thought it would just be like this island surrounded by like the Gulf of Mexico. You know what I mean? No.
Well, because growing up in Texas,
that's
you don't
all I
see
know.
real.
You don't see.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! I was like, I can get in this water. I can see my hands in the water. I swam with turtles. Like it was amazing. And so while I was volunteering, I was president of Student Veterans of America at one of the colleges there, and I would have I had a catered Thanksgiving for all of the veterans who were like there at that school because they moved to Hawaii, usually because GI Bill pays your housing, and housing's pretty expensive, and
it's insane.
So they're like, oh, I can pocket this, I can save some money. But then they realize they're alone, and they're fresh out of the military, don't have family with them. Everybody gets really depressed, and so I would have catered Thanksgivings there, and we would have them on the beach. And it was amazing. It was amazing. So I really tried to incorporate like all of Hawaii into everything. Like I tried to really, really be a part of that community.
Yeah. So is that somewhere that you would consider, I mean, you're just starting your career. Is that someone that you would consider like retiring one day? I always ask people, like, where do you see yourself? Like once you're done with whatever you've decided you're going to do and you're just winding down, is that like your favorite place in the world, or is there somewhere else? Because I know you were in Korea as well.
Yeah.
What's your favorite place that you've been, and why?
Okay. I really loved Hawaii. Cost of living is insane, and I just cannot justify, spending like $2 million on like 1,000 square feet. Like it's weird to me. Yeah. I absolutely loved Berlin.
Really?
Yeah, that was my favorite.
It's cold.
Really? I didn't go in the winter though, so I'm trying to ignore that part right there. I went in the summer, and everybody had their windows open, and the breeze was blowing, and it was just like seeing their healthcare system in action. I mean, I know I'm needed here. Okay, I'm gonna stay here. I'm gonna do the things I need to do, but then eventually to go to some place where everyone believes everyone has a right to medical care, that's very important to me. Absolutely. It was a whole different vibe. Like my husband, we arrived in, we were doing a month-long Euro trip that we planned out. We were so excited. And Berlin was our first place because Kevin has family there. And so we get to Berlin, and all of our luggages have been lost.
Oh.
from America. And my husband had just had PRK eye surgery. And so he had to have steroid drops in his eye every 15 minutes. So that way.
And that was in your luggage.
And that he packed most of it in his luggage for whatever reason. Like, I guess I didn't supervise enough, because he's a guy. But like he packed it away in the luggage. So he only had a few packs with him. And then he told me like, hey, this is kind of a bigger problem than I thought it would be. And so we were like scrambling. I didn't have any clothes to wear, by the way, but we were scrambling. We were panicking. And his cousin, who lives in Berlin, looks just like him, by the way, took us to a pharmacy and told them what he needed in German. And the pharmacist was like, okay, I think we might be able to find a way to help you with this. We have universal health care, but it's like for the residents, but like we might be able to go around this. So we went upstairs to an optometrist that the pharmacist knew, which was totally crazy to me. And the optometrist pulled us aside, and she heard our story that we didn't have the steroid drops that we needed. Mm-hmm. And she was like, okay, I'm going to write down that your cousin he has eye inflammation. And so that way you can get the steroid drops you need and go downstairs. And the whole process was like $15. Wow. Those steroid drops are so expensive here. So expensive here. Hundreds of dollars. It was $15. And it happened in the same day. It was beautiful to see that how they were working together, and it was for someone's health. It wasn't just like, yo, you can't afford this. Yeah. So I loved Berlin, and their public transportation system was really nice. Like, oh.
I've heard this from so many friends who've lived in different countries around the world that, being a United States citizen and resident is a blessing and a curse, because when you come from another place and you're used to having access to health care and you're not having to jump through hoops, and then you come here, it's really challenging. It's very challenging. And so again, though, it's another reason why I think it's so important to have people like you who are conscientious and know that a shift needs to occur. And it's not going to happen overnight. Nothing happens overnight. But it's just reassuring to know that there, are people in the medical industry, in that field, and going into it who are aware of all these things. Because I think something that does happen is any field where, people are handsomely compensated, there are people who go into it who do not care. They're like, I'm going to make my money and I'm out. And that's really, I think we've all encountered those people before as well. And so people just have this level of frustration. So, we're not going to overnight have this huge change, but I do think I'm seeing a shift. I have to deal with the medical community a lot because I have some things that I have to, deal with from a health standpoint. And I've seen a shift, even with doctors who before might say, I don't know, that's kind of, weird. And now they're like, hey, how's your juicing and your herbs go? Your herb garden. And I'm like, it's great. Let me tell you all about my herbs. I will talk about them all day long. Just little things like that. And of course, like parsley's not going to cure anything. But, when you put everything together and consider different modalities together.
Complementary healthcare. Like, it has to be, like, modern medicine can be helped with other types of medicine. And it's amazing. I absolutely love that this is happening right now. Yes. I am not very big into some types of complementary medicine. I can say that.
Right.
However, I do see the benefit to it. Yeah. And at least understanding what your patient's doing. What their lifestyle's like.
Even if you don't necessarily approve 1,000%, just knowing that they can come to you and tell you, hey, these are the protocols. So you know.
Exactly.
And they're sharing that information with you so that you can do your portion of the job or the process, better. But even outside of the complementary healthcare, just the effort in concert that you were talking about, going upstairs to the optometrist and having them do, that type of thing you don't see here as much. But again, to focus on the positive, things are shifting.
Yes.
So yeah, that's very, I never knew that you spent time in Berlin. So now that we talked about this tour, like where else did you go? Like, and I just want to know all the places.
We went to Berlin. That was our start. We went to Hamburg. Didn't like Hamburg at all. I did not like Hamburg.
The home of the hamburger, right?
I don't know, but it was very, very cold, and it was the middle of the summer. It was very strange to me. Like, people were wearing winter jackets in the summer because no, it's horrible. So went to Hamburg. I think after that we went to Amsterdam. Then we went to Paris, and then we went to Pisa and Milan and Rome, and then I think there's Switzerland. Then we went to Geneva, and then the last place I can't remember.
Wow. And you did all of this in a month?
In a month, yes.
Okay.
It was, we realized we'd never want to travel for a month again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was horrible.
It's whirlwind. But I think, too, I think all of those experiences will help you just relate to people. Because I think in any field, I mean, medicine is so specific, and it takes so much to get to that point where you are officially a doctor. But I think anything where there's like an interpersonal aspect and you're relating to human beings, travel is so important.
I agree.
It just opens up your eyes. It opens up your heart. And it makes you understand also you're not the center of the universe. Because I belong to a couple of travel groups. And it's funny, people will say like, oh, I thought we were the bomb. And then you go and you realize like people have completely different mindsets about things that you may have not even considered. It wasn't on your radar at all. And one's not better or worse, one's not right and one's wrong. It's just different.
Yes.
And so I think you're going to be an amazing doctor because of, everything that you've been sharing. Now, you have siblings, yes?
Yes, I have a little brother.
A brother. Okay, I do remember. So is he at all interested? Because I'm always curious with like an oldest child, you always have that pressure of like the younger sibling looking up to you. So has your brother expressed any interest in going into medicine?
No, absolutely none
Okay.
at all. He does not want to go into medicine. He says he hates reading. Okay. I don't know what else to say about that. I love you, Caleb.
Got it. Hi, Caleb. Well, and it's interesting because it's not like a given just because one, but I do know, like I'm an oldest child and I have two younger sisters, and we all are very different in our interests. But even if they're not influenced by your decision in the way that they want to do what you're doing, there's still an influence like, wow, that's my sister. She's doing X, Y, Z. And it kind of compels them to go after whatever. So, if Caleb wants to open a barbecue truck, it's going to be like the best ever. But, it's just having some sort of, example. Now, so you grew up in Houston and you've lived like everywhere else. How do you find time? Because literally as you were talking, my chest was getting tight. I was like, oh my goodness, that's a lot to juggle. So how do you find time just for you? What do you do in your off time? Because you have to have, or maybe you don't. Some people just, I kind of go, and then I pass out. But what do you do to pour back into yourself? Because with highly successful people, highly motivated people, sometimes there can be like burnout. What do you do for Kirsten?
Like volunteering is what I do. It really brings me joy. Like I'm not wasting my time. Like I'm interacting with people. I love talking. I love getting to know people. So when I volunteer, like I'm getting to know like a different perspective on life, no matter what, even if it's just cuddling a child in a hospital. This sounds really corny, but like,
no, it doesn't. It's actually really beautiful. I'm glad you're sharing all of this.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's, I think one thing, I'm trying not to go too deep, but I think one thing in our modern society is encouraging, like, I don't want to say isolation. That's not the right word, but encouraging, I just call it the me effect, where everyone is, more centered on self and their own interests and what they're going to get and how they're going to get there and who they're going to use to get there. And, it's kind of corny to say like that old adage, but no man is an island. Like we all need one another. And so it makes sense to me that that is something that feeds you, because the field that you're going into, you have to have that highly relational aspect to your personality. So I get it. That makes complete.
Thank you.
So now you do, I feel like I missed something, because I know you work with the ASL community. I know you, and what's the proper way to refer? Is it called the ASL community? Is it the deaf community? Like how, when you're in that space, like what is it called? Because I want to make sure.
Deaf and hard of hearing community.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Deaf and hard of hearing community. Yeah. And then you do the work at the hospital. But I feel like there's something I forgot.
Big brothers, big sisters.
Yes. Yeah. How did you get into that?
Oh. This is interesting because I hate kids. Well, that's what I used to say all the time. I was like, I hate kids. I don't like kids. And I was terrified of them, you know?
Well, children are scary.
They're scary. And they
Children are
like have like runny noses and like all this stuff. Like I was like, I don't want to interact with that. No, get away from me. And so when my friends would get pregnant, like I would literally, like I have like a pregnancy phobia. Weird story. But like I would literally, like they know not to like meet me in person for 9 months. Because I can't deal with it because I'll start to panic thinking because you know Alien versus Predator when the thing okay so that caused me issues. Like I grew up
I
having
had a
nightmares.
10-pound baby. I understand.
Oh my gosh. So
It's like yeah.
So I have a few issues.
Some water.
I'm okay. I have nightmares like every month still about like being wheeled on a gurney, and I'm like, why does my stomach hurt? What's going on? And they're like, you're pregnant and you're about to give birth, and I just start crying and sobbing. Wow. And then in the end, this is probably something I should never tell anybody, but I'm gonna say it anyway. In the end, it's always the same. Like I wake up and I'm sweaty and like it's weird lighting, and like they hand me the child and it's a little troll baby. It's a little troll baby. Like there's something deeply wrong with me.
I have to say this. I love that you are just as weird as I am. And I mean that in the best way possible. And Gylan, our producer, can co-sign this. I've said some very strange things to him over the years. But I think what you're doing then, what this is telling me about you, is that you're not afraid to confront your fears. Because to be a big sister, and it's you know, children and younger people, it's sometimes hard to connect. Because, you know, there's different generations, and then also just, you know, interest and language that's used and things that I mean, I will never forget, my son this was so creepy. I think he was like 6 or 7, and I used to have a big fro. And I woke up one day, and he was standing at the foot of my bed, and he just said, "Can I make a pillow out of your hair?" And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Can I cut your hair off and make a pillow?" And I was like, "Get out of here!" Like, to him, that was a perfectly normal thing to ask. It was not unusual. It was not odd. And it freaked me out. I'm like, how long is he standing there? And why does he want to cut my hair? So I understand. But it sounds like you are overcoming that fear of being around young people and children by just head on.
Yes, but it was also, so my husband grew up in the Big Brothers Big Sisters program. He was little when he came over here from Vietnam as a refugee. He had his dad, his mom, his little brother, and his big sister and him. And then his dad was the only one who spoke English besides my husband. And then his dad passed away. And so they were refugees fresh in America, in North Dakota. Actually, in North Dakota of all places. And like the mom couldn't speak English. She had to figure things out on her own to try to make money to survive with her children. And so they got him into the Big Brothers Big Sisters program as a little, and they assigned him a refugee from another country. But it was this older guy who was a refugee. And the guy was really persistent with him. And my husband like told me this over and over again. He was like, I was a very angry child after my dad passed away. I really loved my dad. And so nobody could talk to me, but that guy, he showed up all the time. He just kept showing up, and he would just be like, hey, I'm here in case you need me, I'm here. And my husband wouldn't talk to him. And then one day he just decided, okay, I'm going to open up. And that guy was instrumental to who my husband became eventually. And so my husband said like, okay, like, when we get married, I want for us to be in the Big Brothers Big Sisters program. I want for us to give back because that changed my life. And so at first I was like, I don't know. Like I told you how I feel about kids. Like that's weird. But so I grew up, weird stories, but I grew up in the LGBTQ community. My family is very, very progressive. So like sometimes when people had coming out parties, it'd be like at my house or something. And so I was very familiar with it. And I said that during my interview for Big Brothers Big Sisters. Because they ask you about like different different parts of your life. And so when I mentioned that, the interviewer was like, okay, I think I have the perfect little for you. And it like absolutely the first time I met my little, we talk about it all the time. Like we just started talking, and then it was like a fire. I have never had so much in common with a kid before. Like I know I used to be a kid, but like I, you know, but they are so amazing, and they teach me every single day, and I love them so very much. And it
Yeah.
teaches me like it's not all about me. It's like a constant reminder because it's about what my little is going through at the time.
Yeah.
You know, like it's a weird role. It's like a hybrid. Like you're like part mom a little bit because of my age, because I'm close to her mom's age. I'm close to my little's mom's age. And then it's part like,
You still have to be cool enough
Yeah.
to relate to
Yes.
and have them open up
exactly.
to you.
They're a teenager. So like
Yeah.
sometimes they might not want to talk to you for a few months, you know, and you have to
Right.
figure, I had to learn that because I would cry and be like, my little doesn't want to talk to me. I don't know what to do. And my
Right.
husband would be like, remember, it's not about you. This isn't about you at all. This is about your
Yes.
little. And
Yeah.
that proved true. And one time I was really persistent. I kept texting them. They weren't responding. They were going through something and I didn't know. And then in the end, when we finally met up for a meal or something, they pulled me aside and they were like, Kirsten, I just want to let you know that like, if it wasn't for you, I would have killed myself. And I'm going to cry again, but I sobbed for so long because I was like, I've never felt like I've never wanted to feel that important in someone's life, like for real. But like I was like, I can't believe I can make such a huge difference. And I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad I stayed with it because people get a little and then they leave them after a year most of the time. And I decided I'm going to stay with mine until they're 18, you know, and just keep them in my life. And I'm so glad I did because like that's a huge, that gives me hope. Yeah. And they teach me about like the LGBTQ community a lot because they like this new generation has all these different terms. And like, I thought I was like up to date and I'm not.
Same. I find myself lost sometimes, but I have so many great people that I can just ask and say, I'm asking you because I want to show you respect and honor you. So how do I put this into words properly? Like I'm always trying to clarify. But I think what I'm getting out of what you're saying, and I feel like people that are watching will feel this too, is no matter how busy we are, no matter how much we have going on, we can find time somewhere, somehow to make someone else feel important, to give. And, you know, some people are very comfortable just giving money, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But what people are really craving is like an interpersonal connection and for you to show up, like what you just shared about your husband and texting your little and, you know, just checking in. Those things are so important outside of our profession, just in our daily life, like making time for people to connect because, you know, life is not easy. Life is not easy. What was the poem, Life Ain't Been No Crystal Stair? It's so true. Like people have things going on that you never would guess, you never would know about by just looking at them.
Exactly.
And so I that's really beautiful. This kind of, as I'm talking to you, I'm like, okay, maybe there's some things I can kind of reprioritize because it's true. You get caught up in life and you're just like, I'm so busy. And you're very busy. Like you tell me that I'm busy, but I'm listening to everything that you have done. And I'm like, wow, it's really impressive.
Thank
it's very
you.
impressive.
It's been fun.
Yeah. So I have like 1,000 more questions I want to ask you. Producer, sir, how many times? Okay, 5 minutes? See, it goes by so quickly. Yeah. And the last time he gave me the 5, I thought he was saying hello. I'm like, hey, hi. And he's like, no, 5 minutes. So I asked my last guest this, and I know it's kind of a weird question. And if your belief system doesn't align with it, let me know. But if you had to choose what you could come back in another lifetime as, what would that be?
Like as an animal?
Just as anything.
As anything?
Just in it. Anything.
Wow.
I know it's weird, but I think it's, yeah.
I thought about it the other day. Like I was sitting around and I was thinking about it and I was like, man, it'd be really cool to be a giraffe. But like,
that's my favorite animal.
Really?
Yeah.
Giraffes too.
Giraffes and koalas.
But like, you know, I think it'd be best to come as a human. We're pretty much on the top of the food chain.
Okay.
And like, as humble as I try to be, that's a good position.
And would you do the same? Would you choose the same career path all over again?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I haven't gotten into it yet, but I hope I would, or something similar. I probably would be a social worker. Or right. You know, like people have even told me that they know what type of person I am. Like I'm probably, so I don't know. I just would love to give back. I would love to be in a position where I could affect more people. Like
Yes.
born into the financial position where I could actually do like large scale change. That would be beautiful. But, you know.
I have a friend, we talk about this all the time. I don't actively play the lotto, but I just imagine, I'm like, oh, if I win the lotto, she's like, you've got to start playing. I'm like, oh, yes, that minor detail. But I'm like, I would literally just have foundations and make spaces for people to come together and heal. And so, yeah, I think we have more in common than just our name. This has been very cool. Well, we probably have like 1 minute left now. So I just want to say thank you so very much for taking time out of your day. I know how busy you are, how much you have on your plate. I know you just got back in town from looking at a school, I think
visiting my medical school.
Yes. So just thank you for on the weekend, your private time or personal time, sitting down with me. And I really appreciate you. And I don't want to say good luck. I don't necessarily believe in luck per se, because I know it's so much hard work, but I just wish you all the best on your journey. I'm a cheerleader. I'm a supporter. You have a fan in me. Thank you. Okay, it's a wrap. Did we do it? I'm so not professional. This was awesome. And you like made me cry. I was literally like, I'm trying not to cry. No, don't be sorry.